Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm dear darling, and shall we see what's going on a lovely island of Fawnhollow today? And wow, have you heard the big news? It turns out they removed the Kentech map in League of Legends. Wow! And everyone who plays competitive League of Legends and ranked League of Legends goes wild. But that doesn't really include me, so there you go. Thought I just, it's everyone in the audience who plays League of Legends say hey, that sort of thing. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm rolling a dice, seeing like what sort of demographic I think is currently watching this video. I can't imagine the intersection between competitive League of Legends players and Animal Crossing videos is all too large, but hey ho, what do I know? Hello everyone, right now in Fawnhallow, it's 3:33 PM on Tuesday, January 5th, 2022. Oh, I just heard about CJ's visiting today. Wonderful, we can give him a new commission. Well, not him, Fleck, a new commission. And, oh yes, Pecan moved in. Wait, hold on. Didn't Pecan move in? Didn't I save game? Does Isabel just not announce it in the morning? I suppose she just doesn't announce it in the morning. But yeah, I invited Pecan to, if you missed yesterday's episode. At the end of yesterday's episode, I invited Pecan to stay because I was like, we got Tank's photo, we should have like a rotating cycle of people who take Tank's spot. So I think every time a campsite visitor comes, we'll probably invite them, unless I'd like the current one more, I suppose. What chewing gum seems to help? I remember the guy always ended up wanting to hawk. I don't know if I've ever gotten that letter before. That seems like a new one to me. Yeah, so we're going to go say hi to Pecan, see what she's like. It's nice to have a sort of change of face, because, having the same villagers all the time does make it rather... Oh, she doesn't move until tomorrow, I see, but it's sold. It just Tank moves out today, I see. So things accelerated at a pace of 1 day. I see. She, of course, probably does need time to, like pack all her stuff and get things organised back on her home island. But yeah, this is the only way, apart from using amiibos, which we can actually cycle new villages into Fawnhollow until we get to Fauna. Which maybe is perhaps what we should do. We just have a constantly cycling spot, a villager spot through campsite villages only, until we finally hit Fauna, which... The expected time that takes is about 8 years, so let's not rely on it too much. But yeah, the Kentech map, if you don't know, it's basically like League of Legends in the season, pre-season update. They try to change up things by introducing what's called a Kentech map, having a Kentech dragon. You don't really need to know what they do, but people didn't really like it. And now they removed it following community outcry, I suppose, and that sort of thing. I'm not really all too privy about what that really means. Like, I don't play League all that much, and if I do, I only play ARAM, which is a completely different mode. So I never really felt frustration of it, but I suppose that's also because I don't play competitively. I'm not trying to gain a competitive advantage. I don't really feel the frustration of it, I suppose, when I'm on the losing team and the environmental parts of a map feel very unfair or punishing, I suppose, to deal with. I'm not really privy to a lot of the meta anymore, I suppose, and a lot of these games with competitive elements. But seeing that sort of made me think about how different, because I did used to play ranked in League of Legends. I used to play ranked in a few other games. I used to be much more aware, I suppose, of meta when it comes to all these sorts of games and that sort of thing. And isn't it always weird how different the meta is at the beginning compared to what it is now? Like, if you sent someone, like, a year after the game's been released to, like, the beta version of the game or a release version of the game, they would utterly demolish anyone playing that game. Isn't that crazy? Well, not okay. I don't mean it's crazy as like isn't that like in an unbelievable sense crazy. I think it's kind of obvious it would happen. Of course, someone who has 1 year experience or whatever would be better at that sort of thing, and we're not. But I often think about it, especially because I play these mobile games, and metas do develop in these sort of games, and they change as time goes by. And some of them I have been playing for quite a while, and it's interesting to see how the meta develops and how different it was before. In some cases, it's sort of like a natural development from the release of like stronger units, etc. Power creep or like different mechanics being introduced, widening the meta. But it's also interesting to see where different metas evolve from just like lack of knowledge, I suppose, and much more complicated systems. And I suppose League of Legends is one of them, because I played League of Legends not from the beginning. I played it from pre-season 1, I think. No, maybe season 1. I can't remember. I played it from Cassiopeia's release. Someone else can do the math on exactly which season that falls under, but the season, the meta wasn't particularly well established back then. If you don't know now, basically there's a role in this game called marksman or ranged AD carries, or basically they're and especially back in the previous sessions of the game, they were the highest damage dealers. They're the ones that attack from far and deal a lot of physical damage, a lot of consistent physical damage. But the meta back then, like way Yeah, forgive me if I get details wrong because I'm not that privy to it, I suppose. But the meta way back then in early season 1 or whatever, the meta was that role should go mid lane to maximize farm or whatever. But eventually, they realised that it's kind of dangerous leaving that like vulnerable like late game scaling character, I suppose, on their own in mid lane where they're much more likely to be ganked, and it's also mid lane's quite an impactful lane because it can have an influence over all the map. So it's much better to put a different champion rounds and instead put this ranged hyperscaling character on the bottom lane with a dedicated support character who can help protect them. Because before, if I remember in the season 1, I wouldn't say like every, because I think it depended on the region meta. This might have been the North American meta, or maybe it was the early European meta, but because apparently European meta adopted the support and marksman sort of like combination quite quickly at some point. But also I remember the prevalent meta being like it was support and tank that went bot lane or something, which is completely wild. Like I think if you play nowadays, you'd used to be like, that's completely bonkers because these like sort of roles, etc. in the game are very ingrained now into the actual meta. Because I can't speak for Dota because I don't actually know much about Dota, but as I understand in Dota, at least like ages ago, there used to be a thing where there used to be like multiple very like valid different team comps and like setups, I suppose, for in Dota. Like what about like triple lanes or something where you can have like 2 supports and one character and like no jungler or something like that. Maybe there was like a roamer as well. I don't know, and it's interesting to see how League of Legends despite trying to push some more diversity in that sort of aspect and sort of falls flat a lot of the time and it doesn't end up happening. People are very ingrained into these sort of the accepted meta, and honestly for good reason, because when you're playing ranked with other people, you kind of want everyone to sort of be on the same page rather than trying to establish these sort of different metas and strategies which not everyone's going to be particularly familiar with. If everyone also just knows there's one idea, there's one strategy and can execute it well, that's a lot better than trying to teach everyone different strategies. Sorry, my phone is it's very weird. Teach different strategies which they might not necessarily be privy to, and you know, thus performing worse, etc, etc. Fruit trees, customize, fish, fruit. Okay, can do. We don't have any fruit, so let's go get some. But yeah, I think about the mobile games I play as well. I feel like a very interesting one just to see how like different viewpoints change so rapidly is Genshin Impact. And I'm sorry if you don't like Genshin Impact, and you know, just sort of bear with me because I don't have many other sort of, I can't think of another good example off the top of my head right now. But when Genshin Impact was first released, I didn't play from release, so this is just sort of like word of mouth of what I hear about it. Healers were very, very much emphasised, and one character especially called Chi-Chi was apparently one of the best characters in the game in like early tier lists because she heals. She heals unbelievably well. She's probably the best healer in the game. But you know, early on in the sort of meta for Genshin, people rated her incredibly highly, but as you know, time goes on, the meta being basically, I suppose, how well you can clear the Spiral Abyss, basically being the only late game content, she started falling because, as it turns out, the only thing she can do is heal. She actually has a lot of other shortcomings, such as the fact she's not very she brings essentially no damage to the team. She doesn't have good what's called elemental application, so I guess her utility isn't particularly good. She's not particularly good at empowering her teammates or like assisting them by giving them energy, like giving them mana, quote quote. So she's sort of fallen by the wayside, and now she's been kind of revitalized a little bit, I suppose, with new meta. Because of new items, I suppose, which help her out. Which is, it's just interesting to see how the meta evolves. And I suppose the naive perspective would sort of be to look at and be like, man, people are so dumb. They just like completely skipped over who was super powerful. Like people didn't realize that, like Xiangling or Beidou, sorry, are incredibly good if you've got the investment in them, and they didn't realize that. It's like, how dumb could they be? And people just sort of jumping onto a bandwagon while probably thinking, was like, that's a yes and no sort of situation. I think people can be excused for not exactly figuring out the meta, I suppose, from quite early on. It's, you know, quite difficult. There's multiple systems at play and multiple things that you can try and trial out. So it's a little bit difficult to find out exactly how strong things are. And it's especially, I think it's more indicative of really how the meta of the meta changes, if you get me. I mean, I guess it kind of is just the meta changing, but it's more like the meta changes because what made a character strong back then was basically how much healing can we do and how much investment we required, because it's the infancy of a game. People haven't been playing a game that long, they don't have any resources, so characters which do well without much investment, which have like a high base, tend to rank a bit higher. I think healers tend to rank higher because people are new to the game, they're not as adept at dodging, so being able to recuperate mistakes is a lot more beneficial than necessarily just pumping out damage. But then as people get better at the game, people have invested more resources into it, and of course the difficulty scales up higher because people have been playing the game for longer. Priority shift, and now damage is much more important. Being able to just output basically as much damage as possible in the shortest amount of period of time is really what matters. And maybe the matter will change again once other sort of things get emphasized or de-emphasized. I always find it very fascinating and see the sort of like meta within meta, like what the steps behind the causes and the changes as they are. And I think Genshin Impact is a very clear one about that sort of thing. Because the characters who are considered top tier now, like Bennett, Xiangling, Xingqiu, that sort of thing, those sort of people are very, very strong, but underrated before. And it's just a lot of time it's because they require investment. People didn't realize exactly how amazing they particularly were, and it's always interesting to see sort of how the meta evolves. I think it's like Fire Emblem Heroes had this as well. I can't remember on release. My memory is so vague now. About which characters were strong. I think Takumi was one of the strongest ones. He was like an archer who could also attack people in melee range if he gets attacked, rather than just like not being able to counter attack or something. And he was quite strong. And then the meta changed because as it turned out that's not as useful or something. But there's another character who was like in like near release where people thought they were really strong. I can't remember who it was off the top of my head. But then as it turns out they're not that sort of strong anymore. And it's always interesting to see how much, because I think you can see from these sort of games how sort of like in on the meta the devs are, and if anything, it should I can't speak. It should sort of show you the power of sample size. And what I mean by that is a lot of the times, of course, when they start out these games, if you play these games 3 years on, you'll know how bad some of the earlier units are. You know how like anti-synergistic, how like strange their stat distributions are, how like mixed match their identity is in the game, which makes it like super weird. It's sort of just like, why would the developers even design the characters like that? And you see like years on later, the devs have a better grip, I suppose, on the meta, and sort of understand how to design a character now. Even if they design a character to be, I suppose, to be weaker, at least they have like some sort of clear identity or like a more cohesive unit, rather than being some sort of like weird mix and match and hodgepodge of like stats and abilities which don't like work together or don't even have a clear sort of sense of what the character's trying to achieve. I think it paints a good picture of sample size, where really the devs only have so much like testing power in the first place. They essentially will test a game quite rigorously, I suppose. They'll put it through the paces, especially early, trying to figure out exactly what is strong, what isn't strong, because they don't want to release anything too strong, even if they are trying to make the most money possible, because you want to set everything at a reasonable baseline and have maybe 1 or 2 stronger characters, right, for people to get incentivized putting, which is like, scummy, of course, but you can at least understand. You can see the logic behind it, I suppose, is what I mean to say, not really understand it necessarily. You can follow the logic. Like most game developers, they want a balanced game, but they want a shifting balanced game. There's an interesting, I can't remember, is it Extra Credits? He made a video about it, about like a shifting power balance back and forth. Having basically people take turns being like strong, because if everything was perfectly balanced, the game would sort of come to an arbitrary rock paper scissors sort of decision, which is not very enticing necessarily. Of course, that one, I think my criticism of that is a little bit of abstraction of what can actually happen, because a lot of games tend to have much more deeper strategy and overlapping systems like that sort of thing. I think very rarely can games be so binarily decided as concretely as that. But again, I've not done research into it, so I should take everything I say with a grain of salt. Where was I going with this? Yeah, but the developers, I suppose, and the designers of the games only have so much testing power. They can only find out so much about the game. There's probably only, there's not going to be more than 100 of them constantly trying to test the game out, opportunities, trying to find broken builds. Things are going to slip under the radar. Things are going to go unnoticed, etc. And they're not going to have necessarily, they're going to have a good idea of basically the sort of like design mechanics of a game, but they're not going to have necessarily a super cohesive idea. Like going back to the Genshin Impact, there's a character Xingyan in the game who's very like sort of got a confusing design where she's meant to be like a pyro, she's meant to be like a defensive based shielder, but she scales with 2 different stats, so it makes it hard to optimize her build. And if you optimize in one direction, she's got a pretty good shield, but she does pitiful damage. If you optimize in the other direction, her shield is basically pointless, but she does okay damage. And there's a lot of like weird mixing and matching that goes sort of on, but you know, as the game developers, or it's more like as the community discovers a meta, it sort of gives valuable feedback to the game developers, I'd imagine themselves, being able to sort of put the meta into practice, being like, okay, now we can have like more, not spearheaded designs, but much more directed designs into the characters we release. We can actually give them a much grander purpose. We know how things interact with each other now, and thus can build things from those sort of basis with that sort of knowledge in mind, rather than sort of just throwing things at the wall. Like after going to Fire Emblem Heroes as well, a lot of the early characters are very strange. Like, I'm not sure if I can remember this properly off the top of my head, but isn't it like Henry is one of the characters? He's like a mage or something, but he has like pitiful attack and like okay speed, but the only thing he's got going for him is like his magic resistance, which is a bit strange because isn't it like his kit isn't built around that or something? Like you can see the clear concepts and ideas that have been going on, but also simultaneously you can see how it gets muddied and like an unclear identity starts to form. Like isn't it also like there's a character called Selena? I remember she's got like attack excuse me. Clearing my throat, drinking some water. She had like attack-based abilities or something, but she has like essentially no attack or whatever, and she just has ridiculously high defense or something. Which, you know, after like a year of playing the game, you're looking back at it, you're like, why would they design such a weirdly like contrasting unit and that sort of things? But then of course the meta changes again, where you know they sort of buff older units again. I think she got like a weapon which like scaled with her defense or something. I can't really remember, which you know gave her an actual niche and actual use in that sort of identity in the game. It's interesting, you know. Because whenever like an extremely overpowered sort of like character, card, whatever be it, whatever relevant unit I suppose it is to a game you play gets released, I think it's very easy to sort of point fingers at the devs and be like, why would you release such a broken unit? You just want us to pull this for this unit or whatever, just, you know, from a greedy perspective. And, you know, I'm not going to cover all devs, and I'm not going to cover devs in every situation and be like, oh, that never happens. Yeah, that probably does happen, and it probably does happen quite a lot, to be honest. There's probably quite an art to trying to release a character being unbalanced on either underpowered or overpowered or something, and being able, I'm not sure, but I mean, I don't really know the details of that sort of thing, but you would have thought that the game designers at least themselves, like from a much more intrinsic perspective, like outside of the scope of course, the money making side of the business part, I suppose, of like a video game or anything like that, they would want things to be balanced, right? But they are probably doing their best, and it's just easy to miss things. It's easy to like, it's surprisingly easy to miss how difficult balancing can be. And I suppose I'm talking a little bit from experience as well, like hidden mechanics and hidden interactions which you didn't really see cropping up. Like I talked about this before for one of my friends' birthdays. I collaborated with 2 other friends. These are friends where we always do like birthday things for each other. We made a card game, which by the way, version 1.0 I still need to actually finish creating. We created a card game and we were like all these systems and whatever. But unfortunately, because it got finished kind of late, we didn't get to test it. Which is a shame, but you know, also as it happens with all these birthday projects we do, they always get completed about the day, like the day of or the day before, usually. But yeah, it's just like I had predictions, and that I suppose that was like my sort of first foray into actually like designing, like gaming mechanics and systems, I suppose, which was a very interesting perspective, and honestly, it was quite enjoyable. It was a card game, and it's something I have some experience in, but not tons of experience in, and it just like I suppose it painted to me like how easily sort of like interactions and stuff could come up which I didn't foresee coming, but there were some things I did see coming, like for example, we had 4 characters basically you can play as, and each of us designed one of our character ourselves and that sort of thing, and then one of my other friends, who will say is a bit more chaotic when it comes to these sort of things and cares perhaps a little bit less about game design and balancing than I might necessarily do, sort of wanted to come up with these, like, had these crazy mechanics, and I was just like, we should not put these in, this is going to be too strong, some of these things are going to be broken. But, you know, obviously the fact that we're not this is not like a commercial thing. I'm not trying to be here being like a CEO of a company or anything. I was just like, okay, we'll just do it and we'll sort of see how it goes. And as it turned out, as it happened, his character had incredibly broken mechanics together, which I was like, I could have seen this coming. Like I said this was going to happen. But there's also other things you didn't see coming, like the fact during this game you can accrue currency essentially. Was that actually the fish we had to fish up? That is unbelievable. I didn't even check it. That's astonishing that happened. We're going to slowly make our way to the museum while fishing. You can accrue currency in the game, and I thought I didn't actually do the calculations of this, which, you know, was definitely a mistake. I thought that maybe the currency would be reasonably balanced and the game shouldn't take more, like, at max would take an hour. But they, I unfortunately was on holiday during the actual timing, so I couldn't actually participate in the game. But as I got feedback from my friends for what happened, they played for like 2 hours or something, and they basically went like maybe 3/4 of the way to finishing, and I was like, whoa, okay, that's that was not expected. It turns out that the way I designed the systems, currency gain and other things, and the things I pulled back on because I didn't want things to get out of control too quickly, I ended up putting back on too many of them at once, and it turned out the meta was the pace of the game was way too slow. So much so that it felt restrictive, and a lot of times you couldn't even do anything, and that has been fixed, like, because it's an actual card game, which I would like to be like, oh, you know, I would like it to be playable, I suppose, with friends and that sort of avenue. I've been trying to rebalance, and like, I haven't actually done my calculations again, but I'd rather the game goes too quickly than too slowly, which I now realise I should have had that mindset beforehand, but I didn't. And I basically, I've now buffed everything, and now like the currency gain is like way faster because 2.5 hours to basically get kind of 3/4 maybe of a way through a game is absurd. It's exactly not what I wanted. And there's other things I didn't see coming, like there's a dueling mechanic in the game where basically you can place down cards, and the cards have certain values, and whoever has the highest value hand in the end wins a duel. And initially, I actually had this conversation with the other people I designed the game with. I was like, I can't decide if we should have a limit on this or not, because I can, on the release version, quote, of a game, you could put as many cards down as you want. But I discussed, it's like, what if should we restrict the duels to only be able to play 3 cards at once? Is this okay or not? Because on the one hand, you can have very interesting moments where you sort of just like have a all-in sort of situation where you dump your entire hand in the duel, being like, I have to win this duel. And that seems very enticing, I suppose, in situation to me. And also, like, the idea of you don't know how many cards your opponent might put down. Could it be 1 card? Could they put, like, no cards down? Or might they put down 6 cards or something like that? I found it very interesting as well to have that sort of mystery and sort of mind game scenario going on. But also, I was like, it could get out of hand really quickly if it ends up happening that one character, which did end up happening, can end up drawing far too many cards, can have far too much power, and some characters that's going to feel like criminally underpowered if they don't have any good card draw or anything like that. They're going to left being stuck, being like, I'm severely outclassed in every single one of these duels just because I don't have any options, and because if it comes down to it, then the opponent could always just put down more cards than me and just be like, oh, I win. As it turns out, we definitely should have limited it, but we chose not to. And it's just so easy, I suppose, to get things wrong. Now, yet again, we're essentially, I suppose, the equivalent of indie devs. I don't know why I pulled the fish. I reeled in too quickly. But we're essentially indie devs, and you would have thought that bigger game studios have not only people like dedicated to this task, but people whose entire job is that. It's not our job to balance this random card game we made just like on a whim. People who are incredibly experienced, I suppose, in that situation. People who are in the know-how. People who have seen this sort of thing before. People who are paid to basically run calculations and work out the efficiencies of all these sort of things. We're just sort of vibing out. But certainly, it gave me an appreciation of, like, even that thing can sort of just scale up. Even if your team size is like 100 or so, I'm sure things can slip under the radar. I'm sure you'll have discussions about these sort of things, trying to figure out exactly how this mechanic should play out or whatnot, and then you might just come to the wrong conclusion. And it's weird to see how, and it's interesting to see how, once you basically have a larger sample size of a load of people playing a game, you can now understand the meta better. But here's the problem when it comes to the gacha games, you know, a fault of gacha games, which, you know, gacha games tend to have many faults, is there is a strong incentive not to rebalance older cards. The only things you can rebalance is by buffing cards, so you have to be very, very sure that the card you release is not going to be too strong and completely dominate the meta, because if it completely dominates the meta, oh no, what are you going to do about it? The only thing you can do now is you can only release another stronger card, or a card which specifically counters it in some way, and now the meta is defined once again by this other card, and it becomes suffering. Like, a good thing about the meta is you can sort of like have a wide variety of all sorts of things, so people can strategize and choose by themselves exactly how they want to play the game. And when one strategy just becomes the dominant favoured strategy in all sorts of situations, it becomes smothering. And the sad thing about gacha games is because all the like units and your strength is determined by, like, people could be putting like lots of money into it. If you end up nerfing something, people are not going to be very happy. So the only thing you can do is buff, or specifically build your game now with this new strong card in mind, and it becomes kind of restricting. Or you can sort of just roll with it and be like, oh, this is what meta's going to be like now until we power creep it again, which, you know, I suppose that is the Fire Emblem Heroes way, isn't it? Like, because I'm convinced about it, because it's something which is kind of happening in shiny colours right now. I'm trying to think how to explain it. Basically, there's like different stats that teams can take, and currently dance teams are utterly dominating with the release of a support card, which has utterly changed the meta, but it changed in, perhaps you might argue, too much, because now dance teams are essentially smothering the entire meta. And it's sort of just like, oh, what do you do if you're like one of the developers? You're like, oh, didn't think it'd be quite that strong from our playtest, but apparently it is, because, you know, we're only a team of like 30 people or something, where we might be playtesting it all the time, but it doesn't really compare to, you know, like 10,000 people playtesting it all the time, trying to figure out what the strongest card combination is. And, you know, people who, well, I'm not sure if necessarily the fans might go deeper than the game devs, I suppose, when we're in sort of trying to figure out the meta. You would have thought the game developers would probably be the ones who do it the most, but I don't really know. I guess we'll make an ocean sunfish, why not? You would have thought the game developers, the one whose job it is, I suppose, to create the game, would be the ones much more critical about game, trying to, you know, do the maths about it, trying to figure out exactly the efficiency, trying to figure out exactly all the calculations that you need to happen, rather than relying on the community. But it happens, as I'm sure. Now, everything I might have said here might have just been total, like, nonsense, and I don't really know. I'm not part of a game developing, like, field or anything like that, so I don't really know how that goes. But, you know, I suppose from my sort of my data analytic standpoint, I can very easily see how things can just sort of just be skipped over, just be missed. Things could be misinterpreted, and a rapid change might come out and just, you know, buff things in the wrong direction. Like, maybe your card is just grossly underpowered in the playtest, and so they just give it like a last minute buff to try and resuscitate it. They think it's fine, and then suddenly, oh, it's way too strong. What do you do? And it's just a difficult situation they're supposed to be in. But it's interesting, and, you know, I guess sample size is really a takeaway point, or evolving how metas evolve, I suppose, once more knowledge comes to light. And obviously that's the obvious take you should have on this. Like, obviously, once you get more information, things are going to be more informed. Like, choices are going to be more informed. I don't really need to spell that out for you. That's just kind of like how it is. That's just literally how things work. But it's interesting, I suppose, to dive deeper into it. I suppose to try and really figure out why certain choices were made, and especially the community decisions. I think, like, it's one thing to see what the developers think, but it's another thing to see what the community thinks as well, and their opinion on what the meta is, and, you know, how things shape around that. So yeah, I guess that's really all I got to say. It's about half an hour, so I'll round off this episode here. Yeah, I don't really have any sort of like concluding, like, nice thoughts to sort of tie things together. I just, you know, as per usual, just wanted to sort of ramble about something for half an hour. So I guess we'll round off this episode here. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares are greatly appreciated. Join me, Dear Darling, Discord, follow me on Twitter down below. Hope we can see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye bye for now.